All right, man, we're back. We're back live for another show, another AllStar MMA Live recap show, reaction show for the past weekend, UFC Vegas 68, as well as Road to UFC Finals, which was very interesting to me. I think a lot of people didn't even know that that was even happening. I think a lot of people didn't even know that it was even a tournament that was going on until they saw the card beforehand and said, "Whoa, there's some like unfamiliar names." And there were some good fights, man, on this card. It's not like the highest rated card. A lot of people probably didn't even tune in because they switched the time up for the Asian audience and all this stuff. And I thought, in my opinion, I thought they shouldn't have done that. Since it's in Vegas, you should have just went with the regular time because the Asian audience, they're used to watching the UFC cards at a certain time, and then when you shift it to later in the day, which the card started at 12 p.m. because the original location was Korea, right? So in Korea, the card started at 12 p.m. noon here in Korea. Usually UFC cards start at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and that's what people are used to. And I thought it was okay. I enjoy waking up in the morning and waking up to fights, but it is what it is, man. A lot of people was struggling to push through it because the Bellator card was on as well before that, and you know what I mean. Like it's not about the time; it's about the investment that you put in to sit there and watch the fights, right? And once you get to that end to the main card, people are struggling. I was struggling, man. And it was like in the middle of the day over here. So, anyways, with this card, let's talk about the road to UFC first, right? We had four fights, right? We had four divisions. We had the flyweights, we had the bantamweights, the featherweights, the lightweights, and and when you look at the winners, right? You look at the lightweight winner, Anshul Jubilee, the featherweight, Chung Lee, Nakamura, Hyun Park. Who do you think has the highest ceiling, Clint? Like Clint, who do you think has the highest ceiling between all four of these guys? You watch them fight just off these performances.
Yeah. I mean, going into the whole thing, I thought Rinya Nakamura was by far the most well put together fighter, just athletically speaking, his wrestling background. I think he's got to be the runaway favorite as the highest ceiling of these options. I think Deca probably a little too small, probably needs to drop a weight class. I think Anshul Jubilee, while he's a strong grappler, has gas tank issues and slows down. Yiza actually really impressed me. I thought he kind of got robbed, or I kind of thought he got robbed in that fight. I thought he won that fight. I mean, I'm sure we'll get there. We'll get into it. But Lee, on the other hand, also kind of showed that he's got a bit of a weakness there as well. I think you got to go Rinya. He's my runaway favorite for being the best one of the bunch.
Yeah, it's
100% agree with going with Rinya Nakamura. Not only because he has the same last name as Rob Nakamura, an all-star MMA staple, but
okay.
just pure athleticism, beautiful finishing, like 30 seconds. Like you can watch the whole fight on YouTube. Yeah, as you said, well built. A lot of power for bantamweight, so I think that's the clear-cut favorite. Not because he shares the same last name as J Spec.
Now with Nakamura, he does have a strong background in wrestling. I believe he competed for the national team and kind of like put that to the side so he could pursue MMA. And it was a great choice. Now he's signed to the UFC, joining that stacked bantamweight division. And he has a strong wrestling base, but he's willing to go out there and bang it out on the feet. And he looks pretty crisp on the feet. I bet you he went in there and studied his opponent and said, "Man, this guy, he's not going to be able to hang out with me on the feet," and just took that option and showed out in front of everybody, and even got the 50K bonus, I believe, which is huge for your first fight in the UFC and getting a
That's got to
contract.
be
And these
awesome.
guys are getting real good contracts. I believe their contracts are better than way. Not I believe, I know their contracts are way better than the Contender Series contracts. I believe that these guys are starting at like 20 and 20,
Wow.
25 and 20, I believe. Somewhere around that range. That's their starting salary for the UFC because they went through the tournament. I think maybe they should start doing these tournaments more. Maybe they should start doing a North American tournament like this and just call it Contender Series and just call it the Contender Series Road to UFC, whatever the hell you want to call it, and just maybe get rid of the Contender Series and replace it with this. What do you think of that idea, Diehard?
Man, I just think it's a different audience. You know, we've had the Ultimate Fighter on our side of things for so long. We're kind of done with tournaments. We're done with the long shows that lead up to stuff, that kind of thing. I think the Contender Series is built specifically to get your blood pumping. That's why they don't sign people that don't finish quick. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, I think the Contender Series and the cheap labor for the UFC is kind of here to stay for a bit.
Yeah,
I agree. Anytime they could get Bo Nickel on 2 fights for, what was that? I think 5 and 5, or maybe even less. And it's Dana White's puppy. So God bless you, John, if you could get that message across to Dana to change anything. But yeah, I would like to see anything be mixed up. We might even see the Ultimate Fighter, if it's confirmed with Chandler McGregor, even be just approach from a different angle, just because they know the sheer numbers it's going to draw. So I don't know. Unless anything has the McGregor effect, I don't know if it can really change.
I don't. To me, it's like, can we find a way to pay these guys a little bit more? You know what I mean? I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. You know what I mean? But I think, like, if you're like signed to the UFC, you should be getting paid much more than what the Contender Series is offering you with one fight, right? Just it's. I know it's an audition. It's the hardest audition in all of the world, or whatever you want to call it. That's what they call it. But I don't know, man. These guys are starting off at a really high pay scale, and I don't know. I kind of enjoy that. I think like that gives it a little bit more incentive. But like you said, the show Contender Series is made for that type of audience. You know, the audience that wants, you know, that violence. They want the blood, right? And they, you know, they want to go after it quick and fast. But let's talk about some of these fights, though. You know what I mean? Like, I picked all these correct. Like, I picked Park, I picked Nakamura, I picked Lee, and I picked Jubilee. Lee, you know, somewhat controversial, but I thought Lee was probably one of the most talented out of all the fighters that fought, that competed. Out of all the 8, I thought he was, like, pound for pound, probably the most talented overall, because he comes from a grappling background, but he's shown that he's a very, like, powerful striker on the feet. But then when he faced Yijia just had the game plan of, like, let me try to wrestle fuck him, you know what I mean, to death. You know what I mean? Like, did you, like, when you say that you felt like he won that fight, Clint, like, why would you say that he won the fight? Do you feel like he just had too much control and it was just like you neutralized Lee?
Man, we could have like a 2-hour long show on the judging and scoring criteria in MMA. For me, I think the easiest way I can explain it is, man, wrestling matters. Like, I think there's a threshold where damage does overcome the wrestling and the blanket control time. But for me, it's not a minimal number of strikes. Like, if you've controlled somebody for 4.5, 5 minutes, basically in a round, a couple of elbows from your back isn't enough to say you won that round. Like, the blanket control still overvalues those couple of shots. You know what I mean? And Lee, frankly, folks, you know, I'm using an example that's like more from like the Bellator fight that was a bad decision over the weekend. I'm talking about with Lee, he had a lot of big shots in there. He started feinting the takedown and stepping in with big uppercuts. Like, he landed his own damage in the middle of that fight as well. So people are talking about it being blanket control or just neutralizing Lee. He was dealing his own damage. He landed a lot of big shots of his own in that fight. I just felt like it was close. And then with the control time on top of it, I think he should have won.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling, as Joe Rogan says, is the number one attribute or baseline that any fighter should have. And though the rule set or judging criteria says it should be judged on damage, and just hearing you lay it out there, like a guy who's on top for 4.5 minutes and like devastating elbows, like Tony Ferguson elbows from the bottom, 3 or 4.
Different story.
Like, technically, he did more damage, but it's like in that sense, control is being outweighed over damage. So they should kind of make like a footnote or kind of I don't know, change the language of how it's scored, in my opinion. But yep, dominant win for the lightweight contender.
Well, the thing about it is everybody has their own idea of like how they're judging the fight, right? Nobody's, you know, and whatever the judges come up with the decision, they're like, oh, that's wrong because it doesn't match with what you feel like
The wording is
should have
so
happened.
loose,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
It's-
and even the judges too, you know what I mean? Like you said, we could go 2 hours about the judging, but I felt like it was a close fight, and
Mhm.
and you're right. Ija had the control. He had the control, and he did exchange on the feet, and he did land some because Lee was afraid. I'm not saying he's not afraid, but he was very concerned about being taken down, right? So he couldn't be as loose on the feet because in
Yep.
his first 2 fights, it didn't even last past 45 seconds, both fights, because he was able to either get it to the ground and get the submission, or he was able to knock the dude out. And it didn't give us much time to see like how he has developed. In this fight, it showed us how much he has developed, and he just needs to work on getting back up and not getting taken down, because there's way better wrestlers at featherweight, a lot of them. And him getting on the mic afterwards to say like he got this plan, and I love it. I love that he does have a plan, but pump the brakes, buddy. Pump the brakes a little bit. You know what I mean? We got Paul saying Hyunsung Park is not very good, Junghyun Lee is not very good, and Dooho Choi is scared to be hit now. Those are some solid opinions, right? I think that both those fighters are pretty good. They just need some time to develop. You know what I mean? Like they, a lot of like both of them have been pretty inactive besides, fighting on the tournament. But before that, they were, everything was shut down. A lot of the local shows were they weren't happening during that time. So and Lee before the tournament, he was out for like a few years, which was not very good. But we'll see what happens. Jubilee, he becomes the first Indian to ever win in the UFC, which is very interesting. And he joins the lightweight division. That's just gonna be hard to survive in. He did go in there and utilize a smart game plan against Jekka, because Jekka wanted to just blow his head off, and that's what he was trying to lure him into. He was like, "Come on, let's stand and bang," because he knows if he lands one shot, he could take out Jubilee. Jubilee was a little bit smarter and got past that. So when you look at the straight up performances of all the winners, Nakamura, yes, with his skill set and how he won his fight, he probably has the highest link. I could agree with you guys on that. Let's move on, man. Let's talk about another Asian prospect, and he might be the best prospect out of Japan. Tiara, what do you think, Clint? Is Tiara the best prospect out of Japan?
Ooh, putting me on the spot a little bit there with that one. I mean, he's got to be. He's absolutely got to be. This kid is something else. He's on another level. His grappling is insane. He flows on the mat. I actually thought, when I did my breakdown of this fight, obviously I do a betting podcast. I was like, man, hey, Aguilar is going to pose him a little bit of a problem. He's so tough. He's so tanky. He's got all that muscle. Like, I think Tatsuro is going to have to kind of wear him down a little bit, tire him out a little bit. No, kid ran right through him. Like it was insanely spectacular. I am beyond impressed with what he pulled off in that fight, because I expected this to be maybe a round 2 or a round 3, potentially even a decision victory for the kid. Take him a couple miles in the octagon. No problems at all. The ceiling for Tatsuro, we're not even close to seeing. I'm very excited about this kid, and I can't wait to watch him kind of step up and level up that competition within the octagon. I just hope the UFC doesn't push him too hard, too fast. We've seen what happens when these hyped up prospects get thrown into the deep end too early. They never get to come back down, and then it leads to broken chins and bad stories. So I hope they take him slow. If they do, this kid's going to be a problem.
I agree. You can't push the guys too fast. I mean, sometimes you gotta pull the reins for them on their own horses. You've seen Darren Till, maybe if he had another year, another 2 under his belt of fighting welterweight contenders. Bo Nickel, who knows where he's going to be at the end of the year. If they could just build them up quietly, which is very hard to do in the UFC, especially if you're having excellent performances, I think he'll just be even better trajectory than we could even imagine. But I agree with everything you guys are saying.
Tatsuro, or not Tatsuro, Tiara, Tatsuro. He's only 23. He's had some phenomenal performances already. He's in a flyweight division. He's undefeated. He's in a flyweight division where you could win like 4 fights in a row. and have impressive finishes, and they're gonna push you right into the blood. Look at what happened to Brandon Royval.
Pat Sabatini.
You know, Pat 17 is a flyweight. Nah, come on, man.
I thought you said featherweight. Excuse me.
No, flyweight. But yeah, like Brandon Royval, like he got thrown into the fire kind of similarly. You know, I mean, I think that they might just do the same with because they're always looking for new contenders, right? Like we just saw Brandon Moreno fight Figueiredo for the 4th time. That just shows you like how many contenders are coming up in that division. So Tetsura, I think he's one of the best prospects just overall coming up in the whole UFC period, right? And he's definitely probably the best coming. We talked about Nakamura, but we need to see more from him, right? But right now, as this moment, yes, Tiara is probably the best guy coming up from Japan, maybe even from Asia as a whole and throughout the whole UFC. I'm very excited to see him. And he doesn't really take much damage either, right? He's in there, that triangle to the arm bar, just like, it's just beautiful, man. Like if you can fight like that every single time and finish your fights, you're going to pick up bonuses. You're going to take less damage and you can have a long career, especially at his age. And he's undefeated. They're going to pump that up as much as they can. And I think, and he's trying to speak English as well. I think that's a huge importance right there. Like someone like Nakamura went on the mic and just killed it. Like he just killed it. Like he just went off like on this huge rant, and people love it, man. I think they need to do more of that. All the Asian fighters. Another Asian, I don't know if you would call him a prospect, but he's had a few fights in the UFC. The Iron Turtle, man. He goes in there, and I picked him to win because I felt like this was a showcase fight for the Iron Turtle, even though he's had a bunch of fights already. But this was a very advantageous matchup for him, and he just went in there and did work. He demolished Tululin. What did you think of that performance? And did you feel like it was a setup fight a little bit? Like it was like, hey, this is a fight for you to like show off for the Korean fans, but not in Korea. Clint?
Man, I was actually a little scared on this one. So like I said, I look at everything through a betting lens, and I could absolutely see where Jung Young Park would have the grappling advantage if he got that thing going. Did not expect him to be this dominant. I thought Dennis showed some good things in his last couple of fights. He was showing some improvement. His takedown defense was on point. I thought this was going to be a bit of a back and forth slog. I thought that Jung Young Park was going to have to drag this thing a little bit deeper before Dennis got tired and, maybe survive a couple of big shots. Like Jung Young Park absolutely just floored me with his performance on Saturday. Like I knew the guy was good. I need to rate him up a little bit higher, apparently, than I've got him in my brain right now, because that was a perfect performance from him, and it was total dominance. You love to see it. I like the Iron Turtle. He's a fun guy, and he always gets me with his peace sign and his smile. He's just a good guy to have around. I'm glad he's doing so well.
Short and sweet, the peace sign and the smile, and that's how I'll keep it. But Hype 3 MMA, spot it on. He made it look easy. Got it done inside the first round. He's on a 3-fight winning streak after taking the whatever gun, the RoboCop. I'm trying to make a movie reference here, against Gregory Rodriguez. He has bounced back from that, and just now he's back into the lines. Then you win 3 in that division, you're going to be facing somebody extremely dangerous. But terrific performance.
It just shows you how volatile this game is, right? And especially from Clint's point of view, from the betting aspect of it, because you got money on the line, that he could go in there and RoboCop could just kind of destroy Park, and then RoboCop goes into his last fight against the unknown and gets sparked out, right? It's just like I'm pretty sure a lot of people put money. Yeah, a lot of people put money on RoboCop, most likely on that fight, right? He was a huge, he's back in Brazil, and then just dude, like it's just the style that he brings, I guess. But yeah, Park, he looked great. I was able to like watch a couple of his training sessions ahead of the Joseph Holmes fight, and because I went to Korean Top Team and got to see like how they train and did a little bit of training with them, just some light stuff. And I got like one round of like just some kickboxing sparring with him. But he's one of the coolest people he's one of the coolest people you'll meet. I mean, there's a little language barrier or whatever, but he's a happy-go-lucky guy. He's the Iron Turtle, man. What's not to love about him? He's kind of carving himself a little lane for himself with that nickname, like the Korean Zombie has and the Korean Superboy. Do Koreans have the best nicknames? I don't know. Maybe they do, because they're pretty legit.
I still hold the guy who just fought and won in last night's Bellator main event, Ryan Darth Vader. I mean, it's pretty good, pretty good. But I just wanted to interject. Does Dan Lambert have a hand in Korean top team? Like, is he connected to everything top team related across the world?
I have no idea. Maybe, maybe he's getting a little cash. Who knows? But I don't know. I have no idea about Dan Lambert. I never even seen Dan Lambert in Korea, so I have no idea. And he's never talked about the other top teams around the world. There's a Phuket top team, and there's there's a top team everywhere. Let's move on to the main event. We got Adam Fugit against Yusaku Kinoshita. I picked Kinoshita to win that fight, and he really disappointed me with that performance. Adam Fugit went in there and just did work. He got caught with a little head kick at the start, but then he shook the cobwebs and got the TKO finish from the mount. Clint, did you pick Fugit to take this one?
Almost this close. I bet the under 2.5 here. I was looking for violence in this fight. I knew it was going to get finished. The one thing that I said is I was like, all right, like I'm going to pick Kinoshita to get the win like everybody did. And I thought it was over when he landed that head kick. But what I told everybody was this is a 22-year-old kid. Like thinking about myself and what I was doing at 22 years old, like not all these kids at 22 years old are going to be able to make that leap to the UFC. And there's a real difference between strength and man strength. And these guys that are 27, 28, 29, they're going to have that advantage over some of these young kids. And they were calling him the Japanese Connor. And like, there's no way this kid didn't come in sniffing his own brand. You know what I mean? So like Fugit's a guy that's been criminally underrated, had a couple of really tough fights against high-level competitors. He was the LFA champ. I felt like he was being extremely disrespected. I told everybody, do not parlay Kinoshita. Like, that's it. Like, if you want to bet him, take the knockout, like do something single. Don't parlay him. Fugit could be the guy that busts it. So I'm real happy for Fugit to have that kind of a performance. I do think Kinoshita is the goods. I think he's got all the skills. He'll take some time. He'll be back. Give him some seasoning, take the slow road, take a year off. You know what I mean? He needs to build up some skills. I just think a lot of these Asian markets, they roll over to the United States. They're not ready for the grappling attack we've got over here. Guys like Fugit, who have had a singlet on since they were 4 years old, you can't make up that time difference at that age. He needs strikers. He needs people who's not going to look to take him to the ground. So really just an impressive performance from Fugit. And we're talking completely differently if Fugit goes down to that head kick. And I think Lesserman might have. So, I think there's still a lot to be excited about for Kinoshita moving forward.
Before I let you talk, I wanted to give some background on Fugit as well, man. He's in a very interesting situation with the UFC because he doesn't have like a multi-fight contract. Like he signed a 1-fight contract in his debut on short notice. And this is from me talking to him. And then this fight was just another 1-fight contract with the UFC. So basically he was fighting for his contract, which he never had. He just had 1-fight deals with the UFC. I don't even know if the UFC does that, but Fugit was saying that that's basically what they did for him. And man, he showed out, man, and he did
betting
really
on
well.
himself. I like it.
Yeah.
Credit to you for getting that out of him, man. You do have a very calm presence, and that's awesome that the fighter feels comfortable to disclose that. But now you got me thinking, man. Whenever like I hear like one like little story, I'm like, should the UFC do that on every fight? Like if Cyril Gane, John Jones was like a 1-fight contract, like are these guys gonna go even more balls to the wall? Like they would obviously have to resign guys on losses, but it's an interesting topic. Yeah. Regarding Fugit, he took the head kick and said, Fugit, he goes, I'm gonna finish you now. There's so much to play on that the name, but I try to pay some stock to these smaller organizations, the champions. Obviously, Fugit was a champion for LFA. Bilal Muhammad was a champion for Titan. You have Brave, CFFC, Aljamain Sterling champion there. It's like, I think there is something to that, to having that champion mentality, even if you're at the low man on the totem pole when you start over in the UFC. I think there is something to that, and we saw that last night.
Yeah, with Kinoshita, he's like 22 years old, man. He's just starting his life, right? But he's training at Killcliff FC. So he's got the coaches, he's got the training partners. He could just say to the UFC, like, yo, I'm going to take the next year and not fight and just invest myself into just going into training camp with other fighters that are preparing for fights and just being a body for them and developing the striking, developing the wrestling, developing the grappling, developing the submission game. He could do all that, right? I think he's in a position to be able to do that at his age, and he's surrounded by so many killers at Kill Cliff FC, man. Let's see if he does that, or let's see if he just jumps right back in like 3 months later and 4 months later and it gets another, maybe gets finished again. That's the worst thing that I would hate to see, is like a fighter jumping in too quick, too fast, and then next you know he's cut. You know what I mean? We've seen this happen to other fighters, and it sucks to see, and they never make it back. So who knows?
I'm surprised Raul Rosas is jumping back in there that fast. It's like, I thought if this guy fought once a year till he's 35, he would have like 17 or 16 fights in the UFC, which is a pretty admirable UFC career. But it's like, to jump in there that fast, it's like, can the confidence kind of supersede the skill set? Maybe so, but we'll see the young man.
Man, from what I heard, man, about Raul, the dude can fight. Like, from the training room, from coaches that been in the training room, from other fighters that been in the training room, and when he's training with other UFC fighters, the boy can scrap. The boy
See,
can.
and that's Rosas is setting the bar high for these other 20-year-old kids that are trying to make their debut. And that was kind of who I was alluding to a little bit earlier, that I'm like, man, like, people are thinking these kids can just roll right on into the UFC. I don't think that's the case for 90% of them. We'll see how many more of these 20-year-olds get signed, because I think Rosas is a special talent. And most of these other kids probably are not going to find it as easy to roll into the UFC as he did.
Marcus, you're right. Lil Raul doesn't play with that grappling. He is a phenomenal grappler. I think he's gifted in that department. He just needs to develop that striking a little bit more. But yeah, with grappling, he's very, very good from what I heard. Wrestling as well. The next fight, the return of the Korean Superboy. I was super hyped about this. I'm a guy that like loves to see the Korean Superboy fight. I think there's a lot of people that follow the sport that were hyped about this, and I was underwhelmed, man. I thought he didn't look very good. I thought he should have looked better with this matchup, because if you look at Cal Nelson, he's 1-4 heading into this fight in the UFC, and a lot of people were criticizing if he should even still be in the UFC. So this was kind of like his last chance, to knock off a name and to kind of maybe re-up with the UFC. I don't know if that's his contract situation. I didn't get to speak with him, but Duo Choi, man, he's returning off 3 years. A lot of people are like, oh, they're making excuses like, oh, he wasn't in the military. Like, he was training. He had his own gym. He did have a couple injuries, but he was training the whole time. It was something that he could do, like outside of just competing, is to train. And that's what he did the whole time when he was away. And I don't think he looked any better than he did before. I thought he should have looked much better than he did. I thought he looked similar to what he did before he left for 3 years, but there was nothing new to the game. You know what I mean? Like, it's frustrating, man, to see someone away. What did you think about the fight? Did you think like it was a draw? You know what I mean? Did you feel like it was a draw?
Hell no. That wasn't a draw. Man, they got James Krause being investigated. That was one of the most blatantly corrupt point deductions I've seen in my life. I don't know what that was all about, man. I've got a feeling that maybe Duho Choi kicked Chris Tagone's grandma's shin on his way into the Apex that night or something. Because, man, he was all over Choi the entire fight. I have never seen him hone in on somebody like that, warning him about, like, touching the gloves, which, if a fighter's sticking their fingers in the gloves, like, okay, that's a foul, you can do that. But he was, like, this close to him, like, watching for anything to go wrong. That was highly suspect to me, man. I can't prove anything, but that was highly suspect to me. And with the quickness that he called it, it looked like Choi was going for a can opener to me. Like, it looked like he was pulling his opponent's head to him, which happens. And then Nelson almost kind of threw an elbow, which brought him up at the same time. And they just kind of bonked, like that happens in grappling constantly. I don't know if you guys have done any training with jiu-jitsu, but like you knock heads with people all the time when you both just dip and move the opposite way at the wrong time. It happens. This was not a headbutt. And especially guys, when he pulled it up on replay, you had a second chance to watch that scene play out and you still felt it was appropriate to take a point? No. Like that, no reasonable human being watches that and is like, that's intentional and takes a point. You could tell it was an accident when you looked at it the second time. I get the initial suspicion. Maybe he thought it was a headbutt when it happened in real time. Refs have very hard jobs and they make split-second decisions, and it's very hard to justify them sometimes. It's not a job that I want to sign up for. But when they slowed it down and they watched it on the replay, how do you possibly take that point? Choi did not look anywhere near as good as any of us expected him to in this fight. Kyle Nelson was a layup for him to look good and get a clean knockout, a highlight in front of his home country. The counters that he usually has, the speed of his hands, they just weren't there. Like, I don't know if this was a massive ring rust type of situation or if he's really lost it, but Choi looked very concerning to me in that fight. He still should have won it, though.
To piggyback off everything you're saying, it's like you hope Choi gets another opportunity on a main card. It would probably be maybe a fight night card, or if he just gets some wild matchup to kick off a pay-per-view, maybe a prelim on a pay-per-view, because the man is entertaining to watch. I think UFC 206, the fight against Mr. Cub Swanson. Swanson lives in infamy in everybody's minds and heads. But yeah, you could tell by the mannerisms that he wasn't doing any dirty fouls, and not a Dana White advocate as of late, especially as of late. But for Dana White to say that at the press conference, like when he has probably a million things being shuffled in front of him, even UFC 284 co-main event fighter names that he can't remember, for him to mention that the decision was a poor decision by the judges, that's saying a lot.
Dana White, he loves the Korean Superboy. We know that because he gave him his win bonus after that fight, and I think he probably deserved that. I don't know, man. It's hard to say. You know, I mean, a lot of people are living, you know, off that performance against Cub Swanson, but that's what we expect. We expect the more crisper. We expected the more technical Korean Superboy, because that's what we've seen. If you go back to his history, he is very technical. He is very crisp with his boxing, with his straight right hand. You know what I mean? With his hooks, he's very crisp. But he didn't look like that to me, because like you said, Clint, Kyle Nelson was there for the taking, and he didn't take. It was prey versus predator, and he didn't predator. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't do that in this fight, and that's why I was disappointed. That's why I thought it was underwhelming, his performance. And the foul thing, yeah, that was very, very suspect. Chris Taglioni. He's had some moments, you know what I mean? But every referee has some moments. But he did have a moment to make up for it, right? To not take the point. But he still took the point, which was very, very odd. Like, why do it there? We see clash heads all the time. And Clint, like you said, in jiu-jitsu, you do clash heads all the time on accident. Like, I've been hit in the nose so many times just from someone's forehead, just on accident. It wasn't on purpose. And on the replay, he was going for the can opener. He was like, it just, I don't know, man.
And how many cage grabs and nut shots do they give these guys without taking a point? Like, I understand an intentional headbutt may be the worst foul you can commit in MMA. Like, it'll be obvious, it'll be blatant. There's no way you're hiding that. But that's kind of my point, right? Like, if you can grab the cage 4 times and the ref is still just like slapping your hand away from the fence, but not deducting a point, why are we taking a point for this accidental clash of heads? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. It smelled funny.
It needs to be a lot more vigorous in taking points for nut shots, eye pokes, just in general.
Yeah, of course.
I agree with you there.
Of course, because like I always tell people on the show that watch, that they already give a warning to the fighters in the back. The referee goes to them personally, to each fighter when they're before the fight, and tells them, like, this is how I'm going to ref the fight. This, you know, we're going to be watching for this. Don't do this. They already got a warning. So when you get out there, you shouldn't be getting 3-4 warnings.
You get one of each.
Things. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You get one of each. You get one eye poke, you get one nut shot, you get one fence grab. Once you blow through your one, you get a point deducted for the second offense.
Wait, I thought in the back they're like, John, I'm gonna give you one eye poke, one nut shot, one illegal knee. He's like, all right, sounds good.
You know, John Jones is like, can I use my other, my cage grab and my nut shot as eye pokes? Because that's like my preferred.
It's like a deal you make with them, right? It's like I don't need the nut shot ones. I just let me shift them all to my.
John
it's
Jones
like,
is like, I need the extra eye.
It's like in the NFL when the coaches have the red. What is that? The replay,
the challenge flag.
Yeah, the challenge flag. Right.
Oh God, give MMA corners challenge flags.
give them the challenge flag. Like, why are you taking the point? Korean Zombies throwing in the red flag in there, telling them like, hey, let's rewatch that shit on the screen and really figure out we're gonna take a point.
Smart. I like it.
Yeah, but that would just, I don't know. The thing is that they're trying to limit like stalling the event because it's already so long that it'll just extend things out. I think that's why they don't add certain things to.
You don't want an MMA fight to look like the last 2 minutes of a basketball game. Like that's not going to be fun for anybody.
No. Marcus Mustard, man, love the name. Nelson couldn't hang, and that's why Nelson was trying the takedowns, which did nothing besides a couple slams. Yeah, and then, well, the Superboy was able to reverse him. You know what I mean? Maybe a couple times. I know for once he did. He had him in the crucifix, and then Nelson got out of that. Maybe he showed a little bit of grappling. I don't know.
Guys, how did that even happen? Like, he legitimately went from a control position to the crucifix in one single motion. I have never seen a reversal that bad in my life. And all due respect, like, I'm obviously not a professional MMA fighter, but I don't think in the history of professional combat, somebody has gone from a control position to the worst position in the game in a single swipe. Like, you want to be on bottom? Okay. End up in side control? Okay. Mount, like, I'm still going to give you shit about it, but crucifix? That was the worst scramble I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was wild, man. It was like, yeah, like to be honest with you, I was watching it and then I took my off the screen and all of a sudden Superboy was in the crucifix. I was like, how did that even happen? Because he was on the bottom in a very disadvantageous spot, right? Like Nelson was controlling him, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, man. It was very, very, very odd. But props to, I guess, Superboy's advanced grappling that he never shows.
Yes, Molly McCann needs that same grapple. I was like screaming for McCann to get out of from underneath the Aaron Blanchfield crucifix, and like very similar to the Diehard Choi fight, it just happened instantly, and I was like, "What?" I was like, "Where'd all the hype go?" It goes out the window in 2 seconds. But credit to Superboy for getting out of it.
All right, the next fight, heavyweight division. You got two ranked guys. I don't even think people thought they were even ranked. Marcin Tybura, I took him in this one against Blagoy Ivanov. Man, was this the most underwhelming fight overall? Were you impressed by this performance by Tybura? Does Tybura have a future in this top 15 heavyweight division? What do you see for him, Clint?
Honestly, guys, I've always kind of been a Tybura hater. Personally, not because of him personally, but like his skill set. I just kind of don't believe in what he does.
Here's all the Polish fans.
Okay. And I mean, he's proven me wrong though. He proves me wrong every time I talk about it. So like even this win on Saturday against Blagoy, I thought that the first 2 rounds were very close. I thought Blagoy was landing the more impactful shots. I thought it was either 1-1 or 2-0 Blagoy going into that third. Now, obviously, you can't take anything away from what Marcin did in that third round. That was one-way traffic for him to take down and just maul Blagoy in that spot. So, I mean, he did exactly what he had to do. The cardio seems to check out, even against the guy that wasn't fading in a fight. And that's always kind of been my thing, as you look back at like Greg Hardy, Walt Harris, Romanov. These guys fall off a cliff, and that's kind of when he takes over and does his thing. Blagoy was not falling off, and he still managed to dominate that third round. So I've got to give Marcin props and, kind of say I was wrong. But, man, when you look at, like, again, back to the betting, the bookies had Blagoy Ivanov at, like, -200, -250 going into that third round. They scored the first 2 rounds for him as well. I'm not overly impressed with the performance. I thought Blagoy, you have an argument to be had that potentially he won the first 2 rounds. it was a close fight. It was a close fight. I'm not going to cry robbery. Marcin Tybura did enough to go ahead and get the win, and especially dominating that third round the way he did, he deserves to get the win. But I don't think he stands any chance against like the top 7 or 8 heavyweights in the division. He's a very solid and strong gatekeeper. You're ready for the challenger's circle if you can get by Marcin Tybura.
The saddest part of Blagoy Ivanov's UFC is run, that the most interesting part about him has been like that the story of the scar, and it's like you hear it on Rogan's podcast, you hear it on some early fights, and then I was like, oh man, who's this badass? And I think my introduction to him was the JDS fight, and then I was like, oh my god, he's a puncher. Okay, he's still got a cool story. Let's see what he does. And then, oh my goodness, it's like it's crazy that he's ranked at this point, but. I don't know. Can we move on to the next fight?
Yeah, Tybura, man, he's an interesting character. Both these guys are interesting characters, but they're kind of both in the same position. I don't even know why they even fought each other, to be honest with you, because they could be used in the same manner to maybe an up-and-coming heavyweight, put them against them, maybe a heavyweight made it's on a 2-fight win streak, 3-fight win streak, and have them fight them. But now Marcin is going to probably end up fighting somebody that's going to be top 7. Like you said, it shouldn't happen, but it's going to happen. We're going to see him do it. He's probably going to end up fighting Derrick Lewis or something. Who knows, man? They're going to probably try to do that one. Yeah, man, it was underwhelming at the most.
That. It's like you could like split your difference, or what do they call it in blackjack when you like double down, not the double, when you like split 8s or 9s or something. Like they could have done that with these two guys instead of match them up against each other. And you guys are making terrific points. Clint, you mentioned earlier, just like a minute ago, about Vegas having it minus 250. I forget, maybe it was Anik who brought it up on his pod. That is our open scoring. It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, that's how they see it. Maybe the Vegas guys could be more trusted than the judges on site, but just another interesting point by you guys.
Crazy Pato, he says Tybura versus Tuivasa. What do you think, Clint?
I mean, I would pick Tuivasa by knockout. I would love to see that fight. That's a fight that I absolutely am down for. And honestly, it's one that I think would be pretty appropriate at this point, right? Like, we need Tuivasa to get kind of back in the circle. He needs a step down in competition to reestablish himself in the division. And Marcin just got through doing that back-to-back, so he's ready for that step up in competition. Man, call up Dana and Sean Shelby. You know what you're doing, my guy. That's a great fight. That's a good matchup. I like it.
It is. That is a solid matchup. Yeah, and I think Tuivasa should have probably fought Tybura in his last fight, to be honest with you. To be honest,
Yeah,
like
they were
deadly, clearly honest with you. I think nobody wanted to fight Plavovich, and Tuivasa never says no, especially with the big paydays that he's getting. And he's just like, all right, man, I'll bang it out with him. And that's what he did. He basically went in there and said, okay, I'm just going to swing for the fences, and got knocked out in the process. Ivanov, I don't know where he goes. He's probably going to end up going to the PFL or something, fighting in for the $1 million. It all depends on who manages him. We'll see what happens. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Full circle, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's, you know how it works. Co-main event. This is probably a very unexpected co-main event. You know what I mean? A lot of people probably were like, well, this is a co-main event. When you rank co-main events, I don't know, this probably ends up in the bottom, 5 percentile. Devin Clark, a gritty veteran, been around for a long time, has fought the who's who, takes on a up-and-coming guy in Tao and Jung. I felt like this is a fight. This is kind of like a stylistic matchup, favored for Jung to go in there, defend against like the clinch, defend against the takedowns a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, because he's shown that in the past. And Devin Clark went in there and does what he does, right? Every single time when he wins a decision. He has 7 decision wins in the UFC now. 7. Like, that's his bread and butter. His, most people bread and butter is like striking. Devin Clark's bread and butter is decision wins, Clint. Like, did you bet on this one?
Unfortunately, I did. I thought this was a showcase spot for both Choi and Jung. I thought they were being put in these spots against these opponents to really have the opportunity to get a highlight reel fight and get put on the map. And Jung just did not have it. And I don't know if that's because Jung is not as good as we thought he was, or if Devin Clark is maybe better than we're giving him credit for. One or the other, somewhere in the middle. This was a rough fight. And Jung, even when he had his opportunities, just made all the wrong choices. I mean, deep in that third round, he's in mount on Devin Clark and somehow manages to fall off the back of his opponent and end up right back up against the cage with nothing to do with it. That was a real tough outing for Da-Un Jung, and kind of a slog at 1 a.m. when we're all exhausted trying to stay awake. This was not the fight that I was hoping for. I thought Da-Un Jung was going to get like a round 2 highlight reel knockout and we were going to be done with it. But no, it was a 15-minute grind. So, I mean, props to Devin Clark. He's one of these guys that keeps kind of coming back. He will never just quite go away like we kind of think he will. So props to him for getting his hand raised. But yeah, we got to reevaluate Da-Un Jung after this one, because for me, if you're losing to Devin Clark, I don't have high hopes for you in the division. And again, I mean that with all due respect. Devin Clark would whoop my ass, but I do feel like he's kind of a bar at the UFC. He's a guy that you're measuring where they're going to go in the UFC, and if you can't get by Devin Clark, it's not looking good for you moving forward.
Tough go for Jung, 2 in a row losses at the Jacoby. I was in person for that. That was pretty rough. And then now facing a tough, always motivated brown bear in Devin Clark. I'm sorry if I misremember this. Is this his first fight dropping down to 185?
No, this was not a middleweight fight. This is a 205.
Oh, he's up at 205.
His last fight, he was at heavyweight, and then actually 2 fights ago he was at heavyweight.
With Will Knight, he was at heavyweight. Yeah.
But that was just like a one-off.
Man, he hasn't fought 185 since
maybe ever.
No, it was way back when it was
his
before.
debut.
Yeah, it might have been his UFC debut, because he's been fighting. I'm looking at like Mike Rodriguez back in 2018. He was already up at 205. So yeah, he's been up there for a bit.
Okay, then this makes it easier, because I was gonna say if this was his first fight or return to 185, I was gonna say, oh, maybe we can. There's the field goal has been pushed back further, that maybe we haven't seen the ceiling for Devin Clark, but the fact that this is at 205, I don't know why I thought it was middleweight. Yeah, this is his ceiling. This is originally coming up being kind of like an understudy of John Jones. I thought this Devin Clark was just going to be this wrestling wrecker. I was sold and drank the Kool-Aid. The same thing with Deron Wynn and Daniel Cormier, kind of the understudy, the wrestler. You see them in the training footage. This guy's going to do it. But, they have that prolonged career, give him credit, but this is the ceiling for Baumberg. But it's solid. As you said, he's the Decision City. That's maybe should be his nickname.
Well, when you look at Devin Clark, he's made some changes in the last year or so by switching camps to Team Elevation, and he has new coaches.
Did he break up with his girlfriend or change strength? That like something happened.
Looks like he's got a new doctor too. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, his legs was massive, right? Like his strength and conditioning must be insane up there. But yeah, he's switched to a team that's actually a team. Because when you look at Jackson Wink, they're not really a team. No. Let's be honest, right? If you talk to the fighters that train there, there's a reason why a lot of them have left. Is because they're not really a team. And a lot of guys are looking for a team. And when he went to Team Elevation, he found a team. He's training with like Curtis Blaze. He's training with Zach Puaga, who's fighting next week. Guys that are solid bodies. It's guys that are going to feed off each other and help each other. It's not individual. You know what I mean? So maybe Devin Clark is benefiting that. And maybe he's kicking into his second gear. And this is just one level up from his previous performances. Who knows? You know what I mean? But Jung was shitty. Like he shit the bed on this one. Like Clint, you said, it was a matchup where the UFC probably thought like, hey, we're going to give you this guy and you're going to be able to get a highlight reel, get back in the win column, and then we're going to ride with you, because he was looking like he was one of the highest like rated prospects coming out of Asia, right? And now he's sitting on, I believe, back-to-back losses. And this one was really bad because he was just kind of just dominated by a lot of people consider a gatekeeper, right? And Jung, man, he needs to switch up a little bit. Maybe he needs to go out and go train at other spots. Cross training is not a bad thing. You know what I mean? It's not a bad thing. There's a lot of guys that cross-train. Champs are cross-training all the time. Champions, right? They don't just stick to one spot. So Jung, man, I still think that he's still young. He still has time to develop. He's still going to be able to, do his, I think he's still going to be able to have his best performances in the future. But this one was really, really not something that the UFC expected. And a lot of people didn't expect this, because I picked Jung to win this one. I thought he was going to be able to get a good highlight reel finish or something like that, but it just didn't happen. And we'll see what they do with both of these guys. Now, the main event, it played out just like I thought it would play out. I thought it was going to be an early finish. I thought it was going to be Spivac. He's going to go in there. He's not going to play around with Derrick Lewis and allow Derrick Lewis to throw them bombs. And that's what Spivac did. He stuck to him like glue and just was dragging him back. Derrick Lewis got up, dragged him back down. Derrick Lewis dragged him back down, took him down. Just war on him. You know what I mean? Just like you said earlier, that cold blanket. He was just all over him. And then eventually he got the tap in the first round. What do you think, man? What do you think of Derrick Lewis now, man? Like, Derrick Lewis just doesn't seem like, I don't know, the motivation, is it there anymore, or is he just fighting to just get paid now? I think he's always been fighting to get paid, but I don't know, something is missing, right? The spark is not there anymore. Clint.
Yeah, I mean, he's the definition of a prize fighter, right? Like, he's always said he's a guy that goes in there for the money. He wants his paycheck, get him out of there. Like, that's fine. As long as he doesn't turn into Bob Sapp, I'm good. It seemed, there was a big rumor running around that he was injured coming into this one. And I know we can never like truly prove those kinds of things. We don't know for sure if a guy is injured or 100% or not. No fighter is ever 100%. Man, this is like the worst matchup you could ever give a Derrick Lewis. Now, that said, Spivac has struggled with the big power puncher in his history. Derrick was very live to land a shot early and close the show. Spivac showed some big time improvements. He kept his range. He kept his distance. And Derrick Lewis has a great get-up game, man. He's a big, strong, physical dude. It's almost impossible to keep him down. But Spivac is one of the few, I mean, we're talking, 3-4 heavyweights that is more than capable of taking 300 pounds and just throwing it around the cage. 4, 5, 6 takedowns in a round. Doesn't matter. Dude's got the cardio to do it. And that's the worst case scenario for a guy like Derrick Lewis, especially if he's coming in not 100%, especially with the last fight being canceled, him coming off a COVID break. Like, this was just rough, man. I would like to see Derrick take a little bit of time off, clear the cobwebs, heal up from whatever's ailing him, and give him a banger. Throw him in there with somebody who's maybe one notch down, another guy who's going to look to strike with him. Derrick Lewis, he's had his time in the sun. I never thought he was going to get the title shot in the first place. He got 2 of them. Like, all right, let's make some money, have fun. Let's let him be the entertaining fighter that we all want him to be at this point. But I do think that's kind of the stamp on his ticket. Like, Derrick Lewis needs to not be in the top 5, top 6 conversation at this point anymore. And we all kind of need to be okay with that.
Yeah, if he was to stay in that top 5 conversation, you got to beat Spivac. And this is the fight that it's like, as soon as I was picking Derrick, it was simply because I was like, nah, this can't be it. Add to the resume, continue putting knockouts in the record book for the most UFC knockouts. But this officially, I think, says that we're approaching the 18th hole. And Derrick Lewis, take a lot of time off. Don't want to see him back. Maybe he comes back for a big show in the fall. But if we are nearing the end. And for Serghei Spivac, 3 fights in a row in the heavyweight division. He could be top 7 coming on Tuesday. He's going to get a big fight in his next fight. Probably maybe the first or second fight to kick off a main event on a pay-per-view because they know he brings the fight to his opponent. But I think the bigger story is that the Black Beast needs to take a rest. I've been drinking the Kool-Aid, eating the Popeyes chicken along for the ride with Derrick Lewis, but you don't want to see him. You don't want to see another Tai Tuivasa moment because that was just shocking. And you just hope Derrick Lewis makes the right decision leading into his next training camp and his next fight.
Yeah, Derrick Lewis, man. It's hard to say that he's an elite heavyweight anymore. Who knows, man? But Dana White, he loves him, and he's gonna probably throw him another crazy matchup as well real soon.
He's
They're
gonna
throw him
fight
offers.
in April.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're gonna be like, Derrick Lewis, hey, we you getting paid. Let's throw you in there. Or people are gonna start talking about Derrick Lewis should cut down to 205. Maybe you'll do better. That's what everybody throws out there after a heavyweight, goes on a losing streak or whatnot. Now before we head out, man, I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on a couple topics. Some newsworthy things that are going on in the world of the UFC and just in the world of MMA in general. The first one is McGregor Chandler becoming the Tough 31 coaches. Do you like this lineup of coaches, Clint? And are you going to be watching Tough? And also, when was the last time you watched Tough?
Honestly, man, I'm going to start with the last question. It has been a long time since I've watched Tough, and I hate to admit that because, I mean, I'm a diehard. I want to watch fights. I want to watch MMA. Tough got me into mixed martial arts. Like Ryan Bader is one of my favorite all-time fighters because that's the era that I started watching the sport. And the last couple seasons, it's like they've put minimal effort into them. The matchups haven't been great. The promotion on ESPN Plus was terrible. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't have anything pointing me to the show. So I've kind of fallen off. I haven't really watched it. This one's going to be must-see TV. I mean, it's McGregor. He always is. I think McGregor at this point in his career obviously he's very much on the downslide. He's not going to be in the championship conversation anymore. We all need to kind of temper our expectations with McGregor these days. But he's still going to be entertaining. He's going to run his mouth. He's going to talk trash. And I cannot wait for the motivational speeches that Chandler gives his fighters because that man, you could zip him up in a Captain America cosplay and no one would notice the difference. Like, he can talk. So I'm very much looking forward to this season of The Ultimate Fighter. I think it's going to be a fun watch. It's a good matchup. Both these guys, kind of like Derrick Lewis we're talking about, they're on the outside looking in of that top 5, top 6 conversation at this point in their careers. Let them bang. Let them have at it. Like, that's going to be a good fight. So I think this is great. And frankly, I just want to be on record to say I'm so happy they didn't pick Tony Ferguson for this because as much as I love the guy, I thought the UFC was going to go with the easy layup Conor McGregor W, give him a guy that's washed, and we were going to see Tony flat on his face on the canvas again. And frankly, I could do without that. So I'm very happy with this much more closely lined and competitive fight between a couple guys that have still at least got a little something to show us.
Meet me at the top. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm hyped for this. For the record, Jake Paul got me into mixed martial arts. Just kidding. I've watched pretty much every single season of Tough. Yes, I've been tuned in to the most recent ones. I think 29 and 30 on the ESPN Plus subscription. I've been tuned in. So you better freaking believe that I'm going to be tuned into McGregor and Chandler. And I think it's airing on ESPN. I think Tuesday nights. The ratings are going to be astronomical. Michael Chandler, like you said, this is going to be so awesome because more of the sports audience will be introduced to this well-spoken, just an elite human being. Is like I can't even put into words how much I respect him. I've listened to so many of his podcasts, and it's just very motivational. McGregor is now Redface from Captain America. This guy has more assaults than victories in his entire career. It's probably pretty close, criminal activity. Mob boss here, punching an old guy, slapping a fan's phone. It just goes on and on and on. So
getting hit by a car, just a regular day.
There's conspiracies. I don't even want to say it. Come on, the timing of that. But I hope he's well. I hope he's rested. I hope the car didn't affect anything. He's going to be phenomenal. But Michael Chandler will stamp Conor McGregor's career with this victory. I think they're looking at September. So, yeah, guys, I'm hyped.
Conor McGregor, man, what can you say? He draws eyes, and that's why the UFC is doing this. Is because he draws eyes, and they're gonna try to squeeze as much as they can out of Conor McGregor yes. until they cannot squeeze anything out of him anymore. And I think this could be the last run or the last hurrah for Conor McGregor in the UFC. It could be, man. I think that's what they're maybe trying to do. And I think Conor McGregor, you don't know what's happening in the boardroom, like what kind of contract situation, what kind of deal that they have going on. But maybe this could be the last we see of Conor McGregor in that UFC cage against Michael Chandler. We don't know, win or lose. You know what I mean? If he wins, it could be a different story. If he loses, I don't know. I think we're gonna see him shift to boxing eventually. It's just gonna happen. You know what I mean? There's so many big major fights out there, and fighting and training for MMA is just too horrendous for someone that wants to go box, right? It's just too much dedication, too much going on. And we've seen what happens when he trains boxing for an MMA fight. He gets taken out pretty easily, right? So I think I'm gonna watch too, man. I haven't watched Tough in a long time, but with Conor and his antics, and he's gonna be the self promoter, man. He's gonna go out there and TMZ's gonna write articles about Tough. When's the last time they did that? All these outlets are going to be writing articles about Tough when they never did write any kind of articles, because they're going to be hanging on every single antic or speech or just controversy that Conor brings up. And Michael Chandler's smart. He's going to use that negativity as fuel against Conor McGregor to pump it up even more. You know what I mean? Like, let's see a side of Michael Chandler, like a bad side of Michael Chandler. We know that he is Captain America. We know that he's the Tom Cruise of MMA, right? He's the guy that's gonna go on Oprah and jump on the couch and explain how he loves his wife and blah. You know, he's that guy, right? He's gonna go on The View. He's gonna go on on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He's that guy. But I want to see the dark side of Michael Chandler. No, maybe Conor's going to be able to bring that side of him out, and then we'll see a phenomenal fight at 170. We're going to see a phenomenal fight no matter what, because these two guys are there to entertain. And will that work for McGregor? I don't know. You know what I mean? Chandler might go in there and wrestle him. Who knows? But we've seen that Chandler doesn't really have the best gas tank, and neither does McGregor. So I see this fight ending within the first 2 rounds. It's going to be a fun one for us, right? But Tough is going to be fun as well. Now, the next topic is Fedor retires. Is he the best heavyweight ever? Clint, tell me. Let's erase yesterday's performance. Is he the best heavyweight ever?
Yeah, man. Anytime these legends retire, you got to carve out like the last 4 fights and just toss them out of the bracket. They don't count anymore. It's these legend fighters hanging around a little too long because they can't quite hang it up on time. They all do it. You know, BJ Penn is a perfect example. Like, I mean, Fedor's got maybe the best resume as far as arguments for greatest heavyweight of all time. Like, if we want to talk about, you know, we can put these guys in a capsule, you know, close them down, say, this is your exact moment, your exact prime, and then run a tournament of these prime fighters. Like, you know, guys like Kane are going to be in that argument, but he doesn't have the resume. He doesn't have the long history. Like, you know, that's where the conversation becomes really difficult to pin down who is actually the greatest heavyweight of all time. And frankly, we got to give a shout out to the guy, Daniel Cormier. Like, he did things that nobody expected from him, being the UFC's, you know, 2-time champion, the trilogy fight with Stipe. Like, Daniel Cormier's name belongs on that list as well. I do think because of the longevity, because of the illustrious names, because of how he was a legend kickstarting MMA, you know, he's one of the pioneers. I've got to make Fedor the greatest heavyweight at this point. I don't know that he's going to retain that position. I do think there's people that can possibly catch him, but the current state of heavyweight MMA is these guys can't hold the strap for more than 1 or 2 fights in a row because everybody's so damn good now. There is no head and shoulders above everybody else like there used to be. So yeah, I think Fedor's a guy you got to kind of tip the cap to, show some respect, and say at this point he probably is.
Yeah, I agree with you, man, on all fronts right there. If you look at the resume top to down, you know what I mean, and you know, just taking out the best ever, he's just the icon. He is just a pioneer. Those 2 words you can describe him as. And yeah, Daniel Cormier, of course, man, you got to throw him in there, and Stipe as well. But Fedor, man, is just, I think Fedor's name will last longer than Stipe's name. I don't know why. I just think that it will last longer throughout the history when we're all dead and gone. I think Fedor will always be there. Stipe, I don't know for sure. Francis had his chance, but it doesn't seem like he's gonna be fighting MMA. Maybe not. Who knows, man? It's undetermined. But yeah, DC is gonna be there. DC is gonna always be there. He's gonna live because he's a commentator as well. So we're always gonna see his face. So we're always gonna be reminded of DC and his accolades. But yeah, Fedor to me, he is Mount Rushmore type of fighter. He is a Hall of Famer. He is a legend, an icon, and you can't say that about everybody. You can't, not even just pound for pound. You can't say that about everybody.
We're talking legacy, and that takes the conversation in a different direction.
Yeah, and when because I remember I watched UFC when it first started with Royce Gracie back in the early 90s, and I stopped watching it after that. And then I started rewatching it in around 2004, 2005, and that's when Fedor was fighting at Pride, and that kind of sparked my interest in MMA again. And it always will last in my memory. You know what I mean? Like the fights that Fedor put on, like the comebacks as well. You know what I mean? Those comebacks that he had, where he got slammed on his head by Kevin Randleman and then ended up finishing him like not much longer after that. Fights like that with Krokov, with Nogueira, like he armbarred Hongban Choi, like the guy is like 500 pounds and 7 feet tall, like stuff like that. That's just unbelievable stuff. We will never see ever. We will never ever see that again in fighting. And he did all that. Now, one last thing, Johnny Eblen, is he just the most terrible stylistic matchup for Adesanya and Pereira? Like if Johnny Eblen went to the UFC right now and got an immediate title shot against one of those guys, whoever's the champion after this next pay-per-view, that when they do the rematch, would Johnny Eblen be the guy that can take these guys out?
He might be. Eblen is over in Bellator, a lot of people get slept on. Not everybody watches all the different promotions. Not everybody crosses over that way. There's a few guys and ladies, obviously, there's a few fighters that absolutely would have no problem hopping into the UFC and being a problem the second that they got here. Eblen is one of them. That guy's skill set is crazy good. And to be in a 5-round title fight and just suplexing guys deep into the 5th round to put a statement on the fact that he won that fight 50-45. Like, that was impressive as hell. On top of that, he hits hard. He's also durable. The gas tank is there. Like, yeah, Eblen could be a problem. If they brought him over to the UFC, he could be a top 3 challenger, and I would love to see him run it with those guys right away because he would be an issue.
Yeah, and he's a guy that works on everything as well.
It's my show now, folks. It's my show now. I'm taking over. JHK just disappeared on me, so I'm not sure. He must have just accidentally sneezed and like hit the wrong button. But, frankly, Bellator fighters do not get the credit that they deserve these days. There's some wonky stuff going on in Bellator, obviously, but frankly, they know how to do these homegrown prospects. We have seen Bellator fighters come up through the ranks and be a problem over there in that company. And why would they bother hopping to the UFC? Some of these guys want the honor or the pride of being the best fighter of all time and coming over to the UFC and dethroning a UFC champion, that kind of thing. But it's rare. It's hard for them to pull off. Why wouldn't they stay home and cozy in Bellator where they can make plenty of money, be a star, be treated well? Bellator is doing it right, frankly, in my opinion. And I do wish that we could get some promotional cooperation. The Bellator versus Risen thing was really freaking cool. I know the UFC will never, ever, ever allow the brand to be tainted because God forbid if one of these UFC caliber fighters lost to a Bellator fighter, Dana would lose, any and all credibility. He wouldn't be able to talk shit about the other organizations and talk down to them as far as our fighters being better than yours, having the most elite prospects. But I wish it happened. I still, even though I know it never will, I wish we could get UFC x Bellator because that would just make my day.
Yes, for sure.
Welcome back,
man.
John.
Yeah, man. I don't know what happened, but thank you for rolling with the punches. Man, Clint, I appreciate you for swinging by and breaking down this card. We're gonna have Clint on a lot this year, and yeah, man, he's one of the best guys out there, man. Go follow him, Diehard MMA Pod. He has a show. Tell everybody your show, man, that you put on every week.
Yeah, so I do the Diehard MMA podcast. We're over on Pub Sports Radio live every single Monday night, breaking down the UFC card. And then if there's nothing going on UFC wise, usually I take the week off, I'll be honest with you, but sometimes I get into Bellator and PFL and stuff like that when I've got the time. But we are 6:30 p.m. Eastern time every single Monday night, like clockwork, at Pub Sports Radio. And then we do watch-alongs as well. I mean, I'm sure you guys probably do something similar, but we do live betting watch-alongs with every single UFC fight on Saturdays also. So, if you guys don't know me, come check out Pub Sports Radio. Come hang out for these fight breakdowns. It's a lot of fun.
For sure. It's a lot of fun, man. He knows his shit. I mean, if you want to get advice, he's one of the top guys. I've been watching him for a few years now, and we hope to have him on the channel quite often this year. Everybody go in the descriptions, download the AllStar app. You can follow all the news, all the UFC cards, Bellator cards there, all the fight stats, everything is there. And utilize the picks, app or picks option, because I'm utilizing the picks option. We have a show every Thursday night going over all the fights coming up in the UFC, and we make our picks. Pick against me, pick against whoever's on there. Bring your friends along, build a league. I mean, we're building a community there, and yeah, man, it's gonna be fun. Next week, UFC 284, man. There's a lot of good fights there. Go watch Diehard MMA Pod, and we'll be back later this week. Thank you everybody so much for joining us, and yeah.